there are a lot of typically white middle-class males sitting around with suits and ties on, or jackets and ties, or whatever. What's your view on that? Does that foster a creative environment?
So it's the normal thing, right? I think the thing that we're trying to do is show the way that that type of person can think about the web in different ways. I don't think it necessarily intrinsically inhibits creative thinking, but as the point that David made was, if you have a CEO that's embracing risk and embracing change and embracing the ability to do the things that people want to do online, then you're in a win. I don't think it's to do with particularly cultural background or age or anything like that. I think you see examples of people of all ages and all backgrounds delivering really great creative work, but your observation is correct.
What about, you talked earlier about bean bags and other ways of perhaps encouraging creative thinking. How do you put it into action at Google?
So Google's a funny one because it's inherently a creative environment and inherently a really cool office space wherever you go, whether you're in Asia or if you're in the US or in London too. The spaces are amazing. But I still believe that even we are at risk of doing it in a superficial way. So a load of the rooms around the area where my team work were built as like creative rooms because we're the creative team. So we need glittery green walls and weird asymmetric whiteboards and so on and so forth. And the immediate feedback was like, there's no way that you can actually do creative work in these spaces. What you need is a nice blank room and a big table that everyone can sit around and places where you can write and draw and build things as you go along. And so I think there's a massive tendency for organizations to build spaces that are designed to look creative and encourage non-creative people to feel like they're in a creative environment and actually at the detriment of doing creative work when it comes down to it. But I mean, it's doing a lot of jobs, right? It's doing the job of client comes in and they're expecting to do creative things, so they're shown like wacky pictures on the wall and so on and so forth. So there's kind of a cultural thing going on there as well. But my belief is that spaces should be designed fit for purpose and not fit for aesthetic.
Have you ever imagined a world without Google?
Have I ever imagined a world without Google? Well, so it's difficult. I mean, I'm not digital native, not so much as like my cousin who's 14 who understands YouTube, I swear, better than I do, even though it's my job to understand it. But I find it difficult to remember a world where you didn't have the power of the web. I remember doing my GCSEs and using Google image search to pull a load of images, and I got sent to the headmaster of the school because they thought it was, well, I don't know what they thought it was, some sort of witchcraft, I suppose, but everyone else is cutting pictures out of physical books, right? So, yeah, I mean, I can't really remember a world where you had to gain information from not the internet. But I feel increasingly that less and less people will remember that world, and I think it's for the better.
Just one final one. I don't know what conversations you've had with other people here. What sort of questions are they asking you? Do you get a sense of what they're trying to take away from you being here and the general theme of the event?
Sure. So aside from like the typical stuff you might get asked, like do you make the Google Doodles and have you got glass on you and have you got a slide in your office? I think people, when they speak to me, have an understanding that the angle I'm coming from is much less like being a Google engineer and definitely not being a Google salesperson, but being someone who's trying to help individuals and users and organizations big and small to understand what they can do with the web and make it work better for them. And the diversity within that is massive. So even just some of the examples I showed, you see the difference between providing utility through a mobile application through to creating an amazing piece of video that actually delivers a message that has cut through across the world about something relatively boring. So the way that the web can work for different people and for different brands is really diverse and also really amazing. And hopefully, if someone was to speak to me, the question would be around how can we better use the web to do the thing that we're doing? And a lot of the conversations that I've had have been related to that in various levels of seriousness and lack of seriousness. But yeah, hopefully that's the takeout people will be able to get from speaking to me. And I guess aside from that, the creative work is like the thing that I guess I would be an expert in if I was an expert in anything. And hopefully there's an understanding there of using the types of templates and stuff that I showed, like that idea, not that specific thing, but that idea is something that can work across a lot of different disciplines and applications and professions. So hopefully that's something that people, maybe after hearing me speak, will talk to me about more as well.
Can I ask you another question?
Yes.
Because a lot of people here are interested in the educational environment,
Mm.
and I know you've already had 2 questions on that,
Mm-hmm.
one from me and one from someone else. I think as someone who has children, young children, and it's very interesting in terms of what world they're going to live in the
Mm-hmm.
future.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there has been this is a very long-winded question. You know, today there are bankers making lots and lots of
Mm-hmm.
money from whatever they do, but we can see a future where creative, innovative people are going to be making the money and making a massive difference to the world. It's and I think a lot of people struggle with whether they should be, whether our children should be hot-housed in education or whether they should be left alone to really sort of think for themselves, have 2 hours to sit around at home and do something. Do you have a view on how, you know, life and education might work together to foster a creative person?
Sure. So it's a different type of thinking required, right? I mean, I think that the way that I applied it to myself when I was in education myself was the understanding that you didn't necessarily have to remember every date that every single thing happened in the history textbook, and you didn't have to remember exactly where every country was, and you didn't have to remember exactly how to do the long division thing, because there was always going to be tools that did those things for you. And actually the way that people would have to apply thinking and be taught to apply thinking now is much more the kind of critical thinking and combining data sources and being able to ask the right questions of the tools that we have, right? And I think the way that education is delivered, I mean, it's not, as I said, it's not something I have any kind of specialism in. But my belief, I guess, is that if we're able to encourage that type of thinking and find ways of teaching people to think critically about problems and problem solving, using the resources that are available to them through technology and other means, that's the type of person that's going to succeed in being creative and delivering the stuff that's going to make them a millionaire in the future, rather than being able to recite pi to the nth, even though they might also be able to do that.